In this video, we're going to carry on with my interview with entrepreneur Randy Suggs, and he's going to discuss the value that he got out of having a mentor. Okay, Randy, so in the last video, you talked about how you made the call very boldly to the local successful real estate developer, and then he became your mentor. And so you actually kind of had to, and I'm going to maybe put words in your mouth, but you had to be willing to sit back and say, I don't know everything.
Yes.
And you had to kind of be willing to admit that you didn't know everything. And you had to make the call to someone who was already very successful. And how did that evolve, that relationship, after that lunch where you talked about in the first video, where you took him out to lunch and he's like, hey, why don't you do this for me? And then I'll do this and we'll split it. And so what did you get from him, and how valuable was that to your evolution as an entrepreneur?
It was everything. There's no way that I could put a value on that, because I wouldn't have everything that happened to me after that, all the good fortune that I was able to create, all emanated from that relationship.
Wow.
Because I would have never got involved in any of that without the inside track that he gave me.
And basically what you're capitalizing on then is all the mistakes that he made, along with all of his successful actions. So he said, do this, definitely don't do that. I mean, was there a moment where he like really saved your butt? Were you about to make a big mistake and he's like, oh, Randy, don't go there?
Yes, there have been. One, for instance, I wanted to do a sign. I want to have one of the signs on the freeway or something like that. And he says, no, we've done that. There's no money in that. Oh. And that doesn't really work.
And how much money would you have blown on that?
Well, I actually on my own got one sign going, and that was about $10,000 or something like that.
Yeah, so I mean,
I wanted to do more. And he said, no,
that one little thing right there
for branding, but we don't want to do. And basically, he had a very simple way, which I would have never thought of, and that was simply, we do what he called leech marketing. I said, what's that? And he said, well, we're located next to the other big builders in our area who are doing a lot of marketing, and they'll lead them in a certain way, and we just put our signs there and just pull them off of that into our...
Oh, so they get them to drive into the neighborhood, so to speak, and here's my sign. Like, oh, what do these guys do?
Exactly.
So he's leeching off of their marketing campaign. That's awesome.
That was one of the major ways we did it.
Now, also, I'm sure, because I really enjoy mentoring people, and it's so much fun to take a small business owner and help them double and triple. We're getting those kind of results literally in 3 months, 6 months, even during COVID. And we really feel good about that. And I don't know if I'm curious, did you and he ever have a conversation about what you were giving to him as, the one being mentored, and how much he appreciated that? And then I'm sure he opened the doors, like, hey, you need to talk to this guy, Randy. He's really awesome. I mean, tell me a little bit about your relationship with him and how that evolved.
Sure. Well, what I did is I got offices set right down from where he was. So I actually moved out of the building. Yeah, I moved out of the building that I was in, and actually then moved into his building and just a few doors down. And
on the same floor?
Yes, it was a single
gotcha.
building.
Yep.
And I would just arrive and go in there first thing in the morning, and I would literally be there all day long. I'd sit in on their sales meetings. I would set in on their planning sessions. I would set in on their... one thing which later turned out to be very key was he would have meetings with a real estate agent who specialized in land acquisition, and they'd go over potential land acquisition candidates. And they're looking this over, and I'm sitting in there. I knew nothing about the whole concept of buying a large piece of land and subdividing it to lots and selling it to national builders was completely off my radar screen.
Right.
I never even thought of something like that. And so I learned how to do all that. As far as opening up doors, you're mentioning, this has to be financed because we're running under Suggs Homes.
Right.
And so he said, here's my lender, and he introduced the lender to me, and I'm doing this deal with Randy, and we're bringing back Suggs Homes into the marketplace. And he said, great. And it was a done deal. I mean, I had to give him my financial statement and so forth, but I didn't have to. Everything was paved for me. And the person I mean, there are many trades that are involved when you build homes. And
Right.
all those trades were open up. And so it was just a real smooth path.
So then could you say part of the value of having a mentor was not only the experience of that mentor, but the connections? Because once you've got that connection with the mentor, then by default, you automatically get all of the connections that they have with all of their reputation and position in the local market. And all of a sudden, he did things for you that may have taken you 10 years or 20 years to do on your own and possibly never.
Yeah, 100% of what you said is absolutely correct. What he opened up to me, I would have never been able to do on my own.
Right.
And it really opened up my eyes to the value of a mentor, because I learned firsthand that a mentor can just catapult you quickly to the top if you get the right one.
Then the final point that I want to make in this video is risk, because oftentimes an entrepreneur has an idea, but if they move in that direction, they're going to have to take risk. And there's been more than once in my career that I have literally risked everything in order to go in that direction. Now, I always had a plan B. I don't know about you, but I always had a fallback plan, which wasn't going to be bankruptcy. That's not a good fallback plan. But then let's talk a little bit about your attitude about facing risk and taking a calculated risk.
Boy, you mentioning that brought up something to me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. When I had this going on, so I got a loan. I was able to get a loan, and I didn't know how I would pay that back if this project was not successful, to be honest with you. Although I did have it collateralized by some land that I had. But
worst case scenario, you'd have to surrender that land.
Exactly. But what I would do is when I'm working on this, I would come home at night, and during the day I would just run through all the things that we're doing. And when I get home at night, especially about the time about ready to go to bed and so forth, and things quiet down, I'm starting to think, and I'd say, what am I doing? Am I crazy? I cannot believe that I'm doing this. I must be crazy. The risk involved and all this stuff. I think about it. But what would happen, I'd wake up the next morning and I have things to do.
Yes.
So I'm just doing stuff all day long and I don't think about it.
Yes.
And so I just go. And I get at night, and later on at night, I start thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? Doing this? I'm not a builder. What am I, crazy?
Right.
And so that's how it went. And but after a while, that left as I got more confident and as the projects moved along, and it was a very successful project.
Well, and I talk about this in my book, Fun at Work. I talk about taking on risk, and you have to start. You have to be in action. And you are going to be frozen in position if you just sit there and focus on the risk.
Oh, yeah, you wouldn't do it.
You must be able to encapsulate that risk, set it over to the side, and pursue your action plan.
Yeah.
And just get into action, keep moving forward, use your connection, so to speak, with your mentor, use your mentor's connections, and just keep going. And so for me, as an entrepreneur, it's not about, you have to be willing to take a risk, but you have to be able to encapsulate it, because if you're constantly focusing on the risk, you're going to be frozen. It's the deer in the headlights type of analogy. And so it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that's also what I've been able to do. Take a risk, be willing to confront the worst case scenario. You'd had to surrender some land that you didn't want to surrender, but you encapsulated that risk and you stayed on task, on your action plan every day. You didn't wake up in the morning and not get out of bed thinking about your risk. You got up in the morning and you went and did something to push your strategic plan forward.
Yeah. Well, I believe too, looking at it in retrospect, that if there isn't a tinge of fear or of apprehension, you're certainly not adding a zero to anything. Because when you add zero, it's just kind of scary.
Yeah, you're thinking about 10xing thing, which Grant Cardone obviously has this whole 10x program.
Yeah,
and you see people with t-shirts and baseball caps on in the airport now. I mean, he's obviously taken that concept, but that's what you did to kind of like put yourself into that next arena.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I have this quote in my book, and I don't have it here, but I'm a big race fan. I went to 13 consecutive Indianapolis 500s. I actually was in the lottery and got some seats when the Brickyard opened at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Oh, wow.
Had tickets to that for, I don't know, 20 years in a row. But Mario Andretti won the Indianapolis 500 in 1969. He was actually a Formula One champion prior to that. And this quote is awesome. It's something to the effect of, if as you're going along, it feels comfortable, you're going too slow.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
And Michael Andretti actually set the track record at one point at the Michigan International Speedway, which has 45-degree high banks. His lap time was at 242 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. So that meant he had to be going 270 or 280 into the turns. Mm. And Tom Sneevil actually also said this, when the car feels a little loose, like you're driving on ice, you know you're going the fastest. Mm-hmm. So these guys are going 280 miles an hour into a turn, driving on ice.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's going to be fine. And actually, just to end off on that, Marco Andretti, Mario and Michael's son, Mario's grandson, set the pole in this year's Indianapolis 500, and it was windy. And Grandpa Mario said, wind will only scare you, it'll never wreck you. And he said, that was in my head when I went out on the track today and it was very windy, and it was like, wind is only going to scare me, it's not going to wreck me. So that has its application as an entrepreneur. You have to be able to take a risk. And, you know, there's so many analogies. You're never going to steal second base with one foot on first. There's all of that goes along. So for me, what Randy and I kind of bring to the table here as entrepreneurs is, yes, you have to have a mentor. We each mentioned that our fathers were our mentors, and we have others, but then you have to be willing to take a risk and then look for that opportunity, take a calculated risk, and go for it. So I hope that this conversation has been helpful to you in your entrepreneurial journey. If you have not done so yet, be sure to subscribe, click on the notification bell, and take advantage of the 3 videos that we are pumping out every week. So we'll see you on the next one.